Road. So yeah, I enjoy working for them. They're very good to me. So
I see they had their sign up the other day there. Well, they've had that
yes,
for a while now, really.
yes, and they actually got some extra people in to do the blankets and the crosses this year. Hard to get workers in and hard to get tippers in. Yeah. One year we had to close it down early because nobody would tip. But he's got one guy now, and his I think one of his relatives is helping out, and they're really busy. So that's good. As long as it tips them in, it'll be good for us.
That's good. Well, I haven't tipped for a lot of years, but we when our oldest was just a baby, we'd take him in the backpack we had for him and stick him in a snowbank in the middle of the trees, and we'd tip.
I've done that. I've been doing it 36 years. Yeah, but I love doing it. So
everybody.
Can you guys hear me? Can anyone hear me?
Yepper.
Can you see me?
though.
You
No.
can't see me? Okay,
No,
I
that's
gotta get
all right.
someone to fix that right now.
Fix your camera, Bob.
That's okay. We don't need to see
Turn
it
your
anyway.
camera on.
Oh, I thought he was looking better than ever.
Can anybody hear me?
Couldn't get it the other day for some reason.
I don't think they can.
No.
Zoom, right? Yeah, it's Zoom.
I can hear John talking.
Can you hear us? Can you hear us?
Yeah, we can
You
hear
bet.
you.
There we go. All right, everybody, we'll call the meeting to order.
Why?
Approval of the agenda.
I'm just gonna mute you. When we talk, they won't.
Your governance team. Okay, thank you. We call for the motion to approve the agenda.
Motion to approve the agenda, Dave Morrison.
Second by Judy.
Any conflict of interest? Okay, we'll move on to the review of the procedural bylaw P9.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Annually, this committee gets together and looks at changes that staff recommend based on our experience from the previous year, how our bylaw may be improved, or redundant areas taken off the bylaw. And we were proceeding on that path this year, and we realized that we have new communities, new directors who haven't had experience with our bylaw. So I thought that, and when I say I thought that, I mean that Kelly told me that it would be a good idea if first we gave kind of context about our existing bylaw, what's in it, what it deals with, and since you folks have had this package for a while, you may have questions that we can respond to before we move into the actual changes. And so, like all procedural bylaws, our bylaw details our specific rules of operation with respect to our meetings. And a bylaw, it's very difficult for it to cover all of the eventualities and possibilities that may happen. And so bylaws will refer to another rule of order. There are many of them that where you go if it's not included in your bylaw. And we use Robert's Rules, and Robert's Rules is probably the largest governing operating rules for assemblies in the world. So anyway, that choice was made some time ago. So our bylaw starts off with a preamble where we talk about who we are, and like all of them, it has definitions. And we talk about our organization, the region, our board composition, and you know how folks come on the board, and all of you on the board are fit in the category of ex officio directors. And the reason for that is that you are a director of this organization by virtue of the fact that you hold a different office, that you're the mayor of your community. And so that's interesting. We talk about duties of the board of directors, who the executive officers are. And in our case, the executive officers are the chair and vice chair. Some regional service commissions have a management or executive committee that meets more frequently than the board and is empowered to make certain decisions. We've never gone down that road. We've always thought that it's important that all directors are involved in all organizations. And getting the balance right of an executive committee, one that does the right things as opposed to too much stuff or too little stuff is difficult to find that balance. And so by dealing with things in a committee of the whole, you sort of take that away. We have a section on committees that describes the committees that we have. And if you'll recall, staff brought forward early in the year revision to section 3, which is our committee section. And we did not want to wait until the fall study of bylaws. We had to get up and running, not only for our existing services, pre-reform services, but the new mandated services as well. From there, we go on to talk about conflict of interest. Our section in our bylaws about conflict of interest will read very close to, almost word for word, the sections from the Conflict of Interest Act. We talk about our meetings, where they're held, agendas, how directors can get items on the agenda. We talk about special meetings, how we cancel meetings, the rules around giving notice with respect to meetings. We then come to a section called the procedure for a meeting, and it talks about the call to order, what the quorum, what order of business is on our agenda, what the rules of conduct are, how to make motions, voting. For example, you may not abstain on our board. If you abstain, if you insist on abstaining or refusing to vote, your vote will be recorded in favor of whatever motion is in place. So those are kind of wrinkles. We have an administrative section, talks about where we keep our corporate records and banking details. We have a section on limitation of liability. And what that refers to is that, if you're doing your job as directors in the best interest of the organization, and there's an action against us, the corporation will save you harmless. And we further back that up with directors' liability and insurance policy that's quite robust. And then finally, we have a section on the director's expenses and remuneration. So that's really just the bullets of what's in there. I'd be happy to respond to anyone who might have specific questions about the bylaw now, before we start to talk about changes.
I have a question. So just to be clear, aside from that change to section 3, no other changes flowing from the local governance reform have been undertaken with respect to this, because I see section 2.4 still refers to terms for LSD representatives.
That's correct, Mr. Chair. And when we get to the section regarding changes recommended, you'll see that we address that there.
Thanks, Don.
You're welcome. So, what we then have included in the package are a number of policies that were passed by the board. Their governance policies, GOV. These developed out of behavioral issues, mostly during the first term from 2013 to 2017, when things were not smooth, I'll say. So we have a policy around board members' code of conduct, and it basically says you need to be respectful. We have a policy that outlines in a little more detail the board chair's responsibilities, and one that outlines the responsibilities of the members. of the board. And finally, what is the executive director's responsibility to the board, which now, of course, will refer to the CEO. And that will require updating as well. They're basically put together, they're a code of conduct, rules and regulations. In the last, I'll say 10 years, developing codes of conduct for local government organizations has been a particular area of emphasis of the provincial government. I don't need to tell you folks that things can become, people can be passionate about issues, and it's nice to have a code of conduct that discusses what specific methods you can use or should avoid in terms of having a respectful dialogue about them. So, Mr. Chair, that leads us to what do we recommend be changed this year in our bylaws? And our process, our standard process, is to bring forth bylaw changes at our annual general meeting, which happens in April. There is another bylaw that falls under the purview of this committee, and that's the PRAC bylaw. So that's the Planning Review and Adjustment Committee. Staff are just looking at the changes for that now. Can you mute for a second, please, Kelly? I've got really something. Yeah, so that was quite a tickle I had, and I think I've got it resolved. But I appreciate your patience. So if we can go to Appendix A to the package, thank you. Yeah. We have 3 columns that we use. So we take a 3-column approach when we sit down with the governance committee and when we'll go to the board. We put in what's the bylaw say now. That's a column called existing section. Then we have a column where we identify the changes that we believe, staff believes are appropriate, and we highlight those. And then we have a column that talks about the rationale. Why do we think that we should make these changes? So I'll begin by saying in the entire document, we need to change the name from Regional Service Commission 11 to Capital Region Service Commission. Kind of it's self-evident, but yet it needs to be done. We need to go through the document and find all of those spots. Inside definitions, and further in the entire document, we need to change all the references from executive director, which was the leader of the organization pre-reform, to chief executive officer, who was the leader of the organization now. Also, we need to determine everywhere where it says local service district, and we need to either eliminate that from the bylaw as appropriate or change it to rural district as appropriate. So the numbering that you'll see in the existing section, so section 1, definitions. If we go to page 2, you'll see that we have recommended a change from local service district to rural district. It talks about, the existing bylaw talks about the Minister of Environment and Local Government, and that minister is now the Minister of Local Government and Local Government Reform. And then in section 2.2 of the existing bylaw, we run into a long definition about board composition, and that refers largely to the way that unincorporated areas were represented on the previous board. It was complex, it had a formula, it varied widely from region to region, and we are recommending that that be struck, and just a reference to the Regional Service Delivery Act. Composition for the Board of Directors is determined by section 9.2 of the RSDA. what we believe will happen as a result of that, if there are subsequent changes down the road, we'll just be referring to that section in the act, and we won't have to update our bylaw if changes are made there. We update the current language, the role of the Board of Directors, Regional Service Commission 11, change the capital Regional Service Commission. All throughout this section, we have identified executive director, a number of places, local service district, changing that to rural district, and service liaison with respective communities is the wording that we're suggesting for, mayors and LSD representatives should keep their councils and advisory committees informed. So we're reflecting the current structure of the local government entities that are participating or members of the Regional Service Commission. There's a whole section on what the term of office is for local service district reps. And we want to delete that. We suggest it's appropriate to delete that entirely. In 2.5, changes from executive director to chief executive officer. In 2.5.6, our chief financial officer, who was a required employee in the Regional Service Delivery Act prior to reform, that title has been changed to Director of Finance, and so we're updating the language in that regard. The other thing that has been added is that there are no professional requirements for a chief financial officer, and this version of the legislation, I think quite appropriately, sets a minimum bar for that person to be either a chartered accountant or a chartered professional accountant, have a professional accounting designation. We go on to identify later in 2.5.6 another instance of chief executive officer. And section E clarifies that the CEO is a non-voting member of the audit committee. I'm sorry, that the director of finance is a non-voting member of the audit committee. The audit committee is the only committee that the CEO is not, where the CEO is not an ex officio member. And that's about checks and balances. The audit committee, if our director of finance were to uncover irregularities that happened under the watch of the CEO, that's where he or she would go to seek remedies. And so it's important that the CEO is not an ex officio member of that group.
Director Erickson has a
Yes.
question. Director Erickson, you have a question?
I do, Mr. Chair. Thank you very much. So I appreciate what you're saying in this section, Don. And in my experience of audits at the municipal level, there's always a moment where we go into closed session and the auditors have a chance to ask, do you know of, or have you seen any evidence of fraud or financial impropriety and so on and so forth? At that moment, staff always leave the room. So there's no, pressure from the staff side or so on and so forth, because there's a very big difference between staff and elected representatives in terms of governance and oversight. I haven't been on the audit committee here, but I presume a similar statement's required of the auditors from the governors, the directors. But it would be hard to do that if there are staff positions baked into the membership of the committee. So is that done by a written affidavit or?
Well, Mr. Chair, that's done face to face. We have a similar in-camera session where staff are dismissed. That happens at the first meeting of the audit committee, where the terms of the audit are determined, and then it's a longer in-camera session when results of the audit are delivered to the audit committee.
Okay, but there's no problem with having a member of the committee being dismissed, even though they're
No.
staff?
No, there's no problem. The staff are asked to leave, so. And the chief financial officer, the chief financial officer or equivalent is a non-voting member of the committee, which would be even a step lower than an ex officio member.
Thank you.
So, if we go to keep going down, and I'll say that just again that all references to the chief financial officer have been changed to the director of finance. In the annual general meeting and appointment of auditor, we have deleted the section that refers to inviting chairs of the local service district. The local service districts now are part of one entity, the rural district, and they have had a valid election and they have representatives in the chair. And so going forward, we deal with the rural community the same way that we do with each municipality. In section 673, staff are recommending a change in the amount of time that each director can speak to the same question at a board meeting. Currently in our bylaw, it's 15 minutes, which we believe is too long. And we are recommending that it be limited to 5 minutes. And of the changes that staff are recommending, that is the one that you might have the most interest in having a discussion around. We update section 610, which talks about voting, and the change there is pretty substantive. We now have 3 different methods of voting for depending on the type of question before the board. Most of our votes will be a simple majority, but we also have votes that will be covered by a majority of the weighted votes. And then we have the formula for budget, which is now 2/3 of the members who represent 50% of the 50% plus 1 of the population. This really just repeats the wording that's in the Regional Service Delivery Act. In section 610(7), we clarify that a director is entitled to participate virtually, and that was not present in, I'll call it the pre-COVID bylaw. Another administrative item in section 7.2, we now have a corporate seal that doesn't emboss or press the paper for our seal. It's a print version. And so we're revising the corporate seal section to permit either of those types of corporate seal. The print corporate seal is getting more and more popular. The impression one is sort of, I think it dates back to medieval times. In section 8.2, what we want to do here is add staff member to the section that deals with indemnity. When we went through the existing procedural bylaw, I mentioned that if you do your job in good conscience and respect all terms and conditions, if you end up getting sued, you'll be saved harmless by the organization. As it's written now, that does not extend to staff members, and I believe staff members should benefit from that same benefit. If indeed the staff member is I don't know, guilty of fraud, theft, or whatever it is, that would not extend to them. But in cases where they are drawn into some type of court action by their behavior as an employee of the board who has directed them to do something, seems reasonable that the board would save them harmless. And then finally, in section 9.2, we've updated the director's remuneration to reflect the practice today, rather than relying on a previous date and a comment with respect to inflationary increases. Each time that we open the bylaw for review, we'll update that number. But if we go 2 or 3 years, we don't have to, because we have the automatic indexing clause. And so, Mr. Chair, that's the list of recommendations that we recommend. We're interested to hear the committee's views on that. And we'll remind you that we'll have another session like this, but it will deal with the planning review and adjustment committee bylaw. So I'm open for any questions or clarifications that folks may be looking for.
Anything from the board? Any questions? Judy?
Trying to find how to put my hand up here, so.
Down the bottom. When you mentioned about 6.7.3, the amount of time to address concerns, we did have 15 minutes and we're changed it to 5 minutes. I totally agree with that. If everybody comes and they're organized and they have their thoughts together, they should be able to get their point across within the 5 minutes.
Okay, Director Corey?
Yeah, on the same subject, I agree, but I just wonder if there are moments when the detail, not of the retort, but of a presentation from a community on a subject might end up being pushed by that 5-minute limit, that's all. So is there an opportunity there for in less or something of that nature, I guess? I can't quite imagine what it would be, but 5 minutes is a long time. Whenever I've had to prepare for 5 minutes, it's taken me 2 days, so. That's the question, that's all.
This is very difficult one, Mr. Chair. Whatever number you pick will probably be inappropriate in some circumstances. I'm open to. First of all, I understand. I understand that point. I'm thinking on the fly here. The bylaw talks about speaking to a question as opposed to making a presentation. And I think we might draw some comfort from that.
Yeah, so I'm okay with staying at 5. It's just that I guess that if it ever comes to that time, there's probably a way around it by seeking the support of those or waiting for your second question.
Right. Something with support of the chair. Yeah. And that would be the case if it was 15 minutes as well.
Yeah. So was the 15 minutes, did the 15 minutes have any caveat like that?
It did not.
Okay, so we can leave it then. All right, good. Thank you.
Did Director Erickson or Morrison have their hand up first?
And Director Morrison is a member of this committee.
Yeah. And
So
Greg
you
is
might want
not.
to get him to go first.
Director Morrison.
Okay.
You're on mute, David.
Unmute, that better? Can you hear me?
Yes.
I think on that point that there, as Don pointed out, a presentation is different than talking on a subject, but there's also a part in there where the previous question, no director without consent shall speak to the same question for longer than 5 minutes. So obviously if they have consent, they have longer than 5 minutes, and that's the same as it was in the previous one on the 15 minutes. So in certain cases, with permission of the chair, I think you could talk longer than 5 minutes. That's it.
Okay. Director Erickson.
Yeah, on this point, specifically, I think that phrase, subject to challenge by the board could be omitted. Because the board can challenge procedurally at any point, calling a point of order and get the chair to rule on any issue in front. And if we get in the habit of putting in that clause every time that the directors can bring forward a point of order to be ruled on by the chair, we'd have to submit that in every bylaw section throughout the entire document. So I'm happy with the 5 minutes and happy to streamline it a little further.
Of course, mine are, now that I flipped through it, they're out of order. No surprise there.
Page 5.
Yeah, that's a good point. The comment subject challenged by the board doesn't really add anything in that it is, that it is any item can be challenged by a member of the board. The chair can be challenged, by the board and a vote to the members around the table, so. My own opinion is, we lose nothing by taking it out. And in terms of gaining anything, you know, I've worked on a lot of bylaws for the city and when I was chair of St. Thomas, I believe in fewer words. The fewer words we can have in a bylaw, the better. So if, with the committee's indulgence, when we write the report to go to the board for consideration, we would strike that out. I think that's the consensus. Okay.
On that part, I think that was talking about being able to speak more than once on a subject, not limited to the amount of time somebody has to question, right?
Well, that's true. That's a true statement, Mr. Chair, but it's equally applicable.
So one's on speaking and one's on the time frame.
But
Speaking on the same question.
yeah. But the active challenge applies to everything. I don't think it hurts us to have it in there. I don't think it hurts us. I don't think it changes much to take it out. And the staff would have no strong opinion.
I think it's important for directors to know, with absolutely 0 degree of uncertainty, that they can bring forward a procedural motion to challenge the chair on anything. So, I mean, I agree, it doesn't hurt us to have it in there, but it does make it sound like it's a special case where you can, and I wouldn't want directors to be under that impression. So, but I could go either way on it.
Okay. Any other comments, questions?
If we're speaking in general, I have another one. I'd be more comfortable if we switched over to Borno's rules of order and away from Robert's rules, because Borno's is the one approved by the government of Canada, both the Senate and Parliament. It's the metric rules of order, so to speak, that's been designed to work with parliamentary forms of government like we operate. And Robert's rules of order is an American system written by a colonel in the US Army. It's a larger country, it's a larger field of adoption. But if, as far as I'm aware, if you look at the legislatures across our land and our federal government, they use Borno's. And we won't be using it a lot. They both say more or less the same thing on any topic. But it is for parliamentary governance, not necessarily general governance. So we made that switch at the city about 10 years ago, I think.
Much longer than that.
Oh, it was longer than that?
Yeah, it was when I joined the city in 2002, the city was using Borno's.
Oh, they were? Okay. All right. So maybe it was 20 years ago then. 'Cause you'll have to excuse me. I became a senior last Tuesday. And
That's a good excuse. We all use it every now and then.
well, that's my first occasion. won't be the last.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Unless there's a strong desire by the governance committee to recommend a switch from Robert's orders to any of the other sessions, I would advise against it. Things that Greg has said is true. But it's also true that Robert's rules is the most widely adopted. More people have experience with Robert's rules than they do with Bordeaux's. They're similar, but they're not the same. And as an organization, we have an investment in Robert's rules. There would be a re-education of staff and directors with respect to it. And I'm not sure the effort, well, we'd have to reflect on it in a way staff report, but unless you're really strong that it provides a significant benefit, I would advise against it.
Okay, any other comments? Well, good.
One question, Mr. Chair, if we go and reflect and consult with our councils and there's other concerns about the bylaws, do we have to wait until April of 2025 to make those changes? Or could we and the governance committee consider them before?
So so first of all, the process to change the bylaws requires vetting by the governance committee. So if someone wished to address a change to the bylaws, it'd have to come here for debate, discussion, and a recommendation to the board. It is our practice to approve them in April at the annual general meeting, but just this year we approved a pretty substantive change with respect to committee structure before that. So the board can deal with its bylaws whenever it wishes, but as a matter of practice, it has been typically at the annual general meeting.
Okay.
I guess the other way to ask that question is, this is our only chance to make changes to the bylaws until 2025, until the governance committee makes because what I understand of the process is whatever changes we make at this committee now are going to be turned into a staff report and approved at the AGM.
So changes can be made at any time. This committee meets a minimum of quarterly. So there's lots of opportunity to open the bylaws if there's a matter so pressing as to do it. One of the things that I should remind or maybe advise is our method of dealing with bylaw revisions is not to revise a section. Our method is to repeal the entire bylaw and replace it. And so we are never in a position where we need to look at an individual clause and say, okay, when was that renewed? When was that applicable? We know that bylaw P9 was applicable on the date it was passed, and it will continue to the date that we repeal it. We've had a practice of not doing on the government side what you would call spot rezoning, the equivalent of spot rezoning. But the board can deal with its bylaws whenever it wishes.
Okay.
I have one other question, and then I promise I'll be quiet. Under section 3.1.1, where it's talking about the composition of our committees, and it sets the minimum number of directors. Where would we go to find the rationale for those decisions?
I'm not sure I understand the question, Mr. Chair.
Oh, okay. So if I wanted to bring forward a change and say I wanted 7 instead of 5, how do I know what I'm dealing with in terms of making a persuasive argument? Like, I don't know why it's 5. It just says it's 5.
Well, there's no magic in any particular number. There is magic in the capacity of directors to sit on committees. Well, one of the things that we try to bear in mind is that our directors, in addition to our board meeting and our committee meetings, are also tasked with their own council meetings and their own committee meetings. If we expand the number too large, the burden gets too difficult. Then you can actually end up with less attendance because of burnout. If you have too few, you don't get a broad range of views. So there's no magic in 5. There's no more magic in 5 than there is in 7 or there is in 3. 5 is what it is, and I would suggest if the committee was going to contemplate changing it, that we should have a good reason why we want to change it. And 5 has served us well, but you know, it's not carved in stone.
Chair, yeah, through you, Mr. Chair, Deputy Mayor Erickson, Greg, is it your intention to look at adding additional members, or would it be trying to add in some of our committees? My understanding is for the first time that we have some council representatives, and those that are not council, we have subject matter experts. I'm just wondering what would you be looking at in that, or is it just more of a generic or general question?
It was a little bit of both. TAL. One of the things that's available to me as a councillor in the city of Fredericton is I can attend and sit as a non-voting member at any of our committees. Because I'm very keenly aware that the things that Don was speaking to in terms of burnout and having an equitable workload, I mean, those are serious considerations, and I wouldn't want to challenge this without all the directors having part of a conversation like that. But what I don't want to throw out with the baby in the bathwater is the opportunity for people that have an extra amount of time to donate to municipal service to prevent them from participating. So councillors in the city of Fredericton, they get appointed to certain committees, they have to go, they get votes for those ones, but they're free to go to other committees if they want to so engage, if they have the time and the inclination. And that just brings extra value. So I was hoping to bring that extra value also to the Regional Service Commission, if it fits, and it may not fit, but I just wanted to.
Mr. Chair, I think it absolutely fits. Today's actually a good example of that. Director Erickson's not on the committee. Deputy Mayor Erickson, he's an alternate, and so he's here sitting and providing input. At our most recent finance committee meeting last week, there were a number of directors who attended and spoke to the issues that were important to them. So the point is really, really valid, and it's true here and has always been true here.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, move on.
Mr. Chair, before sort of handing the talking stick to CEO Smith, on section 6, training and board training and evaluation, I want to speak to the evaluation part of that. This committee has had the responsibility of overseeing the board's self-evaluation as respect to how they're doing. And the reason that we have had this practice is that previous boards, and I hope this board, are keen to continually improve their performance, deliver greater value. And so we don't have to talk about it today, but I want to introduce the topic that we should come up with some type of evaluation process. It may not be that appropriate this year in the very first year where we bumped into a lot of stuff and it's all been new to us. It may be hard to evaluate what our progress was. Perhaps this year that should be more of a visioning experience in terms of what would a board with a 1 year cycle, if we work in 1 year cycles, we're still in the middle of the first one. Having gone through that, what do we think a mature board will do? What are the targets? What are the performance measures that are in place that we can test ourselves against? In the past, we've used surveys. They've been narrative surveys. There's been multiple choice. There's been 1 to 5. There's, survey tools. There's one for everything. There's an unlimited number of types. So I don't have a recommendation for you today. I want to plant the seed that when next we meet, we should take time to reflect between now and then. We should take time to reflect on that and have a story, a plan to share with the board for the AGM. So we'll be meeting sometime in the early part of the year. The AGM is, I guess, the keystone event where committees give their full work plan report. And I think it's incumbent on us to sort of address the evaluation process. That's all I wanted to say about that. But I am really keen at any ideas that you all might have about that.
Is there any comment on that, Mr. Chair? And then I'll ask for the floor just for a moment.
Any comments on that?
So thank you, Mr. Chair, and through you, Mr. Chair, to the other members of the committee. Just want to kind of walk back a little bit, if you will, in terms of some of the things that we've done this year. In terms of that, we kicked off our year with an orientation. A little later on, we had our legal training one evening. We had a facilitated dialogue. We've had presentations by some healthcare professionals within the region. Tomorrow evening, prior to the session, we have an opportunity for another learning opportunity within the board structure as well. And with that, and we have to kind of keep that momentum going, because this isn't just a stagnant process where we come together and we want to talk and we're unidimensional, if you will, in one thing. We want to give people that opportunity to hear from professionals, experts, and have that opportunity to have that conversation about where the board wants to go. And I think that's key for staff, is for us to understand with the board, as Don said, talking about that visioning, that planning, how do we get there? And so I'm putting out there today that we're planning, or hoping with the approval of the governance committee on that, we're looking at another January meeting of the board, probably January 26th. I heard from most, if not all, directors, they've asked me to not plan things for the weekends. So I've heard that message loud and clear. And so this would be a Friday morning session, and it will be, right now, it'll be what we make it. I'll be in contact with the directors of our board, with the members. We would do it for the directors and their alternates. And it's an opportunity to have an open, frank conversation, but yet structured on matters of importance. We may have a part of that facilitated, and we may talk about planning in terms of what we're looking for in the future. What are we looking for? But also trying to get the members to connect, to create those synergies around the table. There may be things going on, Mr. Chair, in your community that also resonate with, with Harvey or New Maryland or whatever the communities are. It's to open the door to that dialogue, to have a broader session, and for all of us to, pardon the expression here, just to break some bread, sit down and have a chat and have a look at the the road ahead for the next year and see what that looks like. And really bring everyone together for a morning. We'd start and kick it off early, feed everyone so nobody would be hungry. And we'll end it with a short luncheon. But we'd be looking at a morning session, probably an 8 to 12 or an 8 to 1 on a Friday. And right now it seems that we do have some space available on January 26th. If I can get I'm hoping that I would have the governance committee consensus on that. I know I'm just throwing it at you, but just asking if that's something that we want to do, is bring the board together, not in a board meeting, but to have that conversation.
Feelings from the committee? Judy?
That date's fine with me, and I agree wholeheartedly. Stay away from the weekends, please. Weekends are very valuable to everybody. Yeah, no,
Sure.
and of course, I know, like, I don't know what the new year's going to bring, but if I know ahead of time, then I can book that in, and then if something else comes up, I'll say I've already have plans. But I'm certainly fine with that.
Director Corey?
I'm okay with that. I think we need to continue the orientation process for a while, and there are things that we all need to learn and talk about related to the organization. So I'm fine with that. The date's good with me at this point.
Eric Morrison?
I don't know if I'm gonna see if I'm on mute or not.
No, you're good.
I'm open. Yeah, no, sounds like a good idea to me, and a morning session's good rather than a weekend. Or sometime even an evening session might be better for people that are engaged in other employment activities.
Eric Howe?
I'm good with it. It helps the camaraderie and it's a loosey-goosey atmosphere, so we need that too.
Okay. Okay. So we're all, sounds like everybody on the committee's good?
Yeah, okay, that's wonderful. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay. I don't need to adjourn it now.
Pretty much.
General discussion?
I would like to make one comment if I might, Mr. Chair. I'd like to thank the directors for attending virtually today. I know that many of you prefer to come in face to face. And the board, the staff wants to facilitate what you want. But I'd be amiss if I didn't remind you that you have passed a resolution and meetings in November are supposed to be virtual. And so we really appreciate the fact that you haven't tried to say, I'd really like to come in, because we'll cave if you say that. And but it's your own rule that you're asking us to vet. So we do appreciate the fact that I know that several of you there today on the screen would much rather be here and aren't far away. So thank you very much.
Mr. Chair, yeah, just to reiterate, folks, we're just trying to maintain safety and the health and wellness of the organization as well as yourselves. We did have another person test positive on Friday for COVID, and sent them home in terms of that. Just a couple of weeks ago, when I was out sick, we had 6 out sick in our what everybody refers to our corporate as our corporate office here. That's basically a third of the workforce. So I just want to let you know, if we bring it in and it spreads, we can probably we should shut her down pretty quick, depending on how close the proximity we are in. And we really do appreciate your understanding on this. And there will be some meetings that will have to be in person. There will be some meetings that we'll want to do in person, and we'll try to accommodate as much as possible. But as much as possible, we'll try to live with the rules that were passed by the board.
Good. Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Motion to adjourn?
Well,
You second for that?
Second.
Okay, we're good. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks,
Thank you.
everyone.
thank you.
I just
Thank you.
want to say the Tomorrow night starts at 5, right, for the presentation?
Yes.
I'll be able to join from 5 to 5:30, and then I'll cut off because we have our medical recruitment meeting at 5:30, and I'll book back on at 6:30, if that's all right.
Yes.
Well, since it's you, we'll let it go.
God bless you.
You're lucky we've got a good chair.